it was written by these contractors from a dude who dropped out of U of M and just started a company in the 90s, and they wrote some code. And they said, show us a working version on Monday, and you don't have to give us back our $10,000. And my boss was like, we ain't got $10,000 in the bank. This is going to be a problem for us. We're not making payroll. Plus other bad things are going to happen. So fix this by Monday.
Small text.
So this is ASP. So it was Joy. And there was a bunch of files like savecode ASP, savecode2.asp, savecode.old.asp, savecode2.old.asp. The code was formatted just in whatever random ass way people wanted. And I was like, there are hundreds and hundreds of files of code. I don't even know which of these are actually being called by the application, because there's some crazy shit going on here. And so I was like, I need somebody who's written ASP before, because I've never even seen this stuff. So we got in consultants, and both of them came in and worked 5 or 6 hours, and were like, it would take weeks, maybe months, to figure out what the hell is going on in this code. The one thing I was able to do is write a little Python script that used the website that crawled through and filled out surveys, and run it concurrently to break everything. And it worked. I broke everything. It's awesome. And I was like, hey, I can prove that it's broken, which we already knew. But I couldn't fix it. So on Sunday, the two consultants the second of the two consultants gave up, and he's like, you can pay me more hours and I'll sit here and stare at this crappy code. But it ain't getting fixed, so you should not pay me, because you're not going to have money and your company's going to go out of business. It'll be bad shit. Which is an over-exaggeration. It just would have been rough. So I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about ASP. But I was like, man, I can't even read this. And it was savecode.asp. It's the specific file that saved survey results. So every page called that, and it saved the survey results from that page. It was just a bunch of if statements. Like, if I came from here, then save this stuff. If I came from here, save this stuff. It was a great, great program. But it was like randomly indented. It didn't make any sense. And so I just went through and fixed the indentation. And I found out that they were opening a database connection inside of a for loop and closing it outside of the for loop.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, that doesn't seem right. And it turns out there was a bug in ASP circa 2000 in which you could open them, and if there were too many and it couldn't give you a new one, it would just give you one that existed. So you would grab a
Sounds like
database
Microsoft.
connection that somebody else was already using.
Sweet.
Joy. Concurrencies.
I love Microsoft.
They didn't give you an error. They're just like, hey, I guess I'll give you this pointer. It's exciting. But I just fixed it, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. So I moved the close database connection to inside the for loop. So now it is for every single question in the survey, opening the database connection, saving that thing, closing it, repeat.
Performs well.
Performs well.
At least it works now.
But I
Never
ran
said
my
that'd be
little
fast.
Python script, and everybody got new data. Like every person. I was like, holy shit. If that code had been decently formatted, like any sane person could have picked this up in a second.
Jumped right out.
But 2 people gave up on it. And me, who didn't know anything about ASP
That's because
at all, figured it out
weren't afraid of it.
because I reformatted.
I've
like pretty
taken
code.
programs that were poorly formatted and done the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, and I was just like, well, I'm gonna do something because probably not gonna have a job on Monday. Better try something.
What a
I don't
great
know what to
story.
do.
Yeah,
In
for
other
sure.
words, the Go format command solves all kinds of problems.
And so I used to use this example as why significant white space was a great thing in Python. And it is, and I love Python for that reason. You cannot have improperly indented code in Python is an error. Like, if you change the indentation, it changes the meaning, because you're now out of that scope. And if you do it by mistake and it's not where it should be, Python will yell. But Go format does the same thing, and it gets rid of all these people bitching about tabs versus spaces, and whether you want 2 spaces or 4 spaces. There's a lot of people who won't use Python just because white space is significant. Turns out, in written language, they added spaces between words. This is like the most important thing in human literacy that happened since the phonetic alphabet. Was, you know, in the 10th century, you had a blob of text. It was all just words, no spaces, no punctuation.
Carved in stone.
It's very hard to read. Like, I have trouble reading that. And I'm reasonably competent at reading.
Compression. Stone tablet.
Right. But it turns out, as soon as you put spaces between the words, people can start recognizing whole words at a time. People who could not learn to read before can learn to read now.
Yeah, but you put 1 or 2 spaces after the period.
But if you write,
Another argument, right?
oh, don't get into that.
Because if you're texting or programming.
Well, actually, that is a very appropriate thing to the difference between Go and Python. Python enforces significant white space is meaningful, and you must do it this way. And typewriters did the same. Go is like, hey, you're going to put a period, I'm going to make it 1 space. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. Which is nice, because I grew up, because I'm an old fart, typing on typewriters, and I had to do the 2-space thing, because that's what my typing teacher told me. And it was drilled into me, and now I do it wrong. All the time.
But consistently.
Consistently wrong. Unless I'm trying hard, in which case I do it inconsistently.
So is Go format just a tool you can use if you want to?
So it is a regular part of the compile and test
Okay.
phase. So it will just do it for you.
Okay.
Like, there's very little, and you should be, like, the standard of the Go community is before you check in any code anywhere, it should be Go format.
Okay.
Because then it gets rid of all this.
Yeah. Bug tech filter, like I said. Okay.
Yeah, lots of, like, Go plugins for VI and Emacs. And if you have something other than VI and Emacs, it probably could do that too, but I don't know about these worlds of things other than Go or Emacs and VI. And actually, I don't know anything about Emacs.
You can play
Nothing
games with
less.
it.
Oh, I know that it is amazing, because my friend Rick Copeland does amazing things with Emacs, but he starts typing and things are happening and I don't know what is going on. Also, that happens when other people watch me use Emacs, so even though I'm bad at it. Okay, so that was my little sub thing. All right, back to the main line of this story. So should we rewrite Juju in Go? Well, we could keep it in Python. Like, we had written 20,000 lines of code in Python. It is no fun to throw that away. Also, Juju does a lot of things with Amazon EC2 and OpenStack and a bunch of things where there are API clients already written in Python. It used YAML, where there's already a Python library. Basically for anything you want to do. Because Python is a mature language, and there's a library for this. We had a pretty large code base with really good tests. We at Canonical have a lot of really smart Python programmers. A huge number, actually. Well, huge. Like maybe a couple hundred. Like a number that's real. And people with core, like Python core developers and whatnot. We have a lot of investment in Python. And at this point in the world, there are a lot of Python programmers that exist. You can find them on the interwebs. On the other hand, There are a lot of Python programmers. Who knows Theodore Sturgeon? No one. Okay, Theodore Sturgeon was a science fiction writer. And I'm not going to read this whole thing because you all can read faster than I can talk. But people call this thing Sturgeon's Law, and they say that 90% of everything is shit. That is Sturgeon's Law. He calls it his revelation, and it happened that he was reading or talking to a bunch of, he wrote science fiction, and quite good science fiction, I believe. But he would always talk to people, and they'd be like, oh, I've read some science fiction, it was terrible. He's like, yeah, I read some fantasy novels, I read some romance novels, I read some modern literary fiction. 90% of that is all terrible too. Like, you shouldn't blame science fiction because it is equally shitty to everything else. The reason this is important is there's a lot of Python programmers, but there are a lot more shitty Python programmers than there used to be. So there's a lot of them, but they're not all good. The cons were, there are more cons than this, and I will talk to a couple of points that I